However, none of this hello and welcome friends. My class is about marketing, digital marketing, social media marketing and business ideas. If you want to learn marketing or business or want to expand your market and business, then this class is for you. I will tell you such a method and such suggestions. If you learn with interest, you will get great success in your business. Marketing is a managerial orientation. Management, the technique, practice, or science of managing or controlling, the skillful or resourceful use of materials, time, etc. Collins' Concise English Dictionary. Ever since people have lived and worked together in groups, there have been managers concerned with solving the central economic problem of maximizing satisfaction through the utilization of scarce resources. If we trace the course of economic development, we find that periods of rapid growth have followed changes in the manner in which work is organized, usually accompanied by changes in technology. Thus, from simple collecting and nomadic communities we have progressed to hybrid agricultural and collecting communities, accompanied by the concept of the division of labor. The division of labor increases output and creates a need for exchange and enhances the standard of living. Improved standards of living result in more people and further increase in output, accompanied by simple mechanization, which culminates in a breakthrough when the potential of the division of labor is enhanced through task specialization. Task specialization leads to the development of teams of workers and to more sophisticated and efficient mechanical devices and, with the discovery of steam power, results in an industrial revolution. A major feature of our own industrial revolution, and that of most which emulated it in the 19th century, is that production becomes increasingly concentrated in areas of natural advantage, that larger production units develop and that specialization increases as the potential for economies of scale and efficiency are exploited. At least two consequences deserve special mention. First, economic growth fuels itself as improvements in living standards result in population growth, which increases demand and lends impetus to increases in output and productivity. Second, concentration and specialization result in producer and consumer becoming increasingly distant from one another, both physically and psychologically, and require the development of new channels of distribution and communication to bridge this gap. What of the managers responsible for the direction and control of this enormous diversity of human effort? By and large, it seems safe to assume that they were, and are, motivated essentially by, and occasionally enlightened, self-interest. Given the enormity and self-evident nature of unsatisfied demand and the distribution of purchasing power, it is unsurprising that most managers concentrated on making more for less, and that to do so they pursued vigorously policies of standardization and mass production. Thus the first half of the 20th century was characterized in the advanced industrialized economies of the West by mass production and mass consumption, usually described as a production orientation and a consumer society. But changes were occurring in both. On the supply side, the enormous concentration of wealth and power in super-corporations had led to legislation to limit the influence of cartels and monopolies. An obvious consequence of this was to encourage diversification. Second, the accelerating pace of technological and organizational innovation began to catch up with and even overtake the natural growth in demand due to population increases. Faced with stagnant markets and the specter of price competition, producers sought to stimulate demand through increased selling efforts. To succeed, however, one must be able to offer some tangible benefit which will distinguish one supplier's product from another's. If all products are perceived as being the same, then price becomes the distant. Self-interest. Given the enormity guishing feature, and the supplier becomes a price taker, thus having to relinquish the important managerial function of exercising control. Faced with such an impasse, the real manager recognizes that salvation and control will be achieved through a policy of product differentiation. Preferably this will be achieved through the manufacture of a product which is physically different in some objective way from competitive offerings, but, if this is not possible, then subjective benefits must be created through service, advertising and promotional efforts. With the growth of product differentiation and promotional activity, social commentators began to complain about the materialistic nature of society and question its value. Perhaps the earliest manifestation of the consumerist movement of the 1950s and 1960s is to be found in Edwin Chamberlain and Joan Robinson's articulation of the concept of imperfect competition in the 1930s. Hitherto, economists had argued that economic welfare would be maximized through perfect competition in which supply and demand would be brought into equilibrium through the price mechanism. Clearly, as producers struggled to avoid becoming beer-tully passive pawns of market forces, they declined to accept the rules of perfect competition, and it was this behavior which was described by Chamberlain and Robinson under the pejorative title of imperfect competition. Shades of the hidden persuaders and waste makers to come. The outbreak of war and the reconstruction which followed delayed the first clear statement of the managerial approach, which was to displace the production orientation. It was not to be selling and a sales orientation, for these can only be a temporary and transitional strategy in which one buys time in which to disengage from past practices, reform and regroup, and then move on to the offensive again. The Americans appreciated this in the 1950s. The West Germans and Japanese in the 1960s, the British, belatedly in the late 1970s, until the mid-1970s nearly all our commercial heroes were salespeople, not marketers, hence their problems. Stokes, Bloom, Laker. The real solution is friends. If you like my class at all, then you like my class. Subscribe and do not forget to share.